Welcome everyone. Just want to give 1 minute for some more attendees to join. Okay, so we shall begin. They will fall in where they may. If I can just ask the panelists to put on their cameras temporarily, so I can do the necessary introduction. Thank you very much. Welcome to SciTechKnoFest 2.0, the Deep Tech Revolution, brought to you by the National Institute of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology in Weehurst, our Platinum Social Investment Partner, Shell Trinidad and Tobago Limited, and our other valued sponsors. We are so excited for you to be immersed into the exciting world of science, technology, and innovation. My name is Josanne Warner, and I will be your moderator for today's SciTalk, Embracing Digital Reimagining Experiences in a Post-Pandemic World. Mr. Richard Cheng, Mr. Owen Williams, and Professor Patrick Hussain will be your presenters. Before we begin, please note the following guidelines. Members of the audience are required to adhere to the attendee code of conduct, which is listed in the festival booklet located at the info desk. The Q&A segment will take place at specific periods during the session. Please use the chat feature to submit your questions, and please be respectful in the chat box. Let us begin. Introducing Mr. Richard Cheng. Richard Cheng is a national of Trinidad and Tobago and is currently the Manager Technical Examination in the Intellectual Property Office IPO, Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs. Mr. Acheng holds a BSc in Agriculture from the University of the West Indies. He has previously worked in ornamental horticulture, landscaping, and the golf course construction industry, in addition to being a market analyst and a technical cooperation assistant at the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Mr. Acheng joined the staff of the Intellectual Property Office of Trinidad and Tobago as a technical information specialist in 1999. His present responsibilities as Manager of Technical Examination include, among others, serving on the executive management team, performing substantive examination on patents, utility certificates, industrial designs, new plant varieties, and integrated circuits, and advising the controller on all technical issues relating to the grant of intellectual property rights. He is one of the prime presenters of the National Intellectual Property Training Center, NIPTC, at the IPO regarding public outreach. And this extends to teaching IP in various IP clinics and modules up to the MSc level. Mr. Acheng also serves in the region as part of horizontal cooperation efforts assisting other CARICOM countries with patent and industrial design legislation and examination of backlogs of patent applications. Welcome, Mr. Acheng. Introducing Mr. Williams. Owen Williams is a professional software developer. He's been building software for just about 2 decades. He's a chief software engineer at Teleo Systems, a software company from Trinidad and Tobago. Over the course of his career, he's built cloud, mobile, Windows, web, and interactive SMS applications. Yeah, SMS. He writes much less code now than he did before, but he keeps the latest version of Visual Studio and VS Code installed on his computer, in case of an emergency. He's traded in the IDE for the whiteboard and will find a reason to go on one in almost any meeting. Owen lectures from time to time at local universities, drawing from his experiences across life to weave technology lessons that are sometimes insightful and most times practical. Owen is a member of the Global Communications and Technology team of Congress WBN, a faith-based organization that spans the globe, where he provides insights in software architecture and development support on a diverse set of human development initiatives. Erwin and his wife are having fun learning how to raise their children in these unprecedented times with joy, love, and gratitude. Welcome, Mr. Williams. Introducing Professor Patrick Hossain. Patrick Hossain attended the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, where he obtained 5 degrees, including a PhD in electrical engineering and computer science. He has worked at Bose Corporation, Bell Laboratories, AT&T Laboratories, Ericsson, and Huawei. He has published extensively over 150 refereed journal and conference publications. He holds 41 granted patents in the areas of telecommunications and wireless technologies. He was nominated for the Ericsson Inventor of the Year Award in 2004, was the Huawei US Wireless Research Employee of the Year for 2007, and is a 2015 Anthony Sapka Caribbean Laureate for Science and Technology. Patrick is presently the Administrative and Technical Contact for the TT Top Level Domain, CEO of the TTNIC, and a Professor of Computer Science at the University of the West Indies. His present areas of research include applied data science, operations research and performance, and pricing optimization for cellular networks. Welcome, Professor Hossain. Now we will have Mr. Cheng for his first presentation.
Great. Thank you for that kind introduction, Jose. And welcome also to my fellow panelists and of course to the guests out there. What I'm going to share with you is a little bit about some opportunities that we saw being taken advantage of during the pandemic. That's the whole thing. Some people react to the pandemic and say, oh, it's been a tragedy. And we acknowledge that livelihoods were lost, not just lives, but livelihoods were lost, and companies were closed or shuttered or their growth severely hampered.
Mr. Cheng.
One of in the environment. Hello, yes? Yes?
Sorry, it was for a bit, so I was just checking that you were still there.
Okay. I might have well frozen for a while. Okay, so just going to get into a few slides just to illustrate what we've been talking about. Right, can we see that?
Yes, it's showing.
Great. Right, so some definitions. Why bother with this intellectual property thing? Well, we're talking about express creations of the mind, and we imply that we're talking about the human intellect, but we get onto that just now. So we often say that you might know some things, and some things you can share, but some things, once you share them, everybody else will know it. And that's what we call explicit knowledge. The stuff that we cannot get from you is perhaps what we call tacit knowledge. That's stuff that you retain as secret knowledge. Okay? And the IP system is there to allow some degree of control or recourse once you've allowed information to leave you or knowledge to get out there into the ether, so to speak. Because usually once you let things go, you can't get them back that easily. But the intellectual property system can restore some degree of control. And what we're talking about when the more common words that you might know, copyright and of course industrial property. You might not know that term, so you might know patents for inventions, trademarks for brands, industrial designs, and maybe trade secrets down there at the bottom. What we made some observations as to what happened during the pandemic, and I'm going to use some of these as illustrations, and you probably guess some of these. Which kind of companies thrived during the pandemic? I'm pretty sure that if you didn't know Zoom before the pandemic, you know it very well now. I didn't care too much about Zoom because we thought that Skype was the communications king, which it was at the time. And then the pandemic allowed Zoom to take over. And just to tell you what we call success, at the end of 2019, the market cap for Zoom was $18 billion US. And by the end of 2020, it was 77 billion. Now it has gone down since then. It has during 2021 it dropped to 58, and then at this point in this year is valued at 38 billion. So that represents a sort of a blip in value during the prime time of the pandemic when everything was online. But it kind of represents how priorities shifted, and platforms that were maybe not so important back then became supremely important during the pandemic. Shopify provides a platform for merchants who trade online, who do e-commerce. So they do the underlying software and the platforms for them. And of course, that's what we would do. We were shopping online. And of course, we're not just sitting at home, we were being entertained. Many of us, but not just Netflix and chill, but we just zombied out with binge watching series that we probably never saw before. You got to catch up on the stuff that you never had time to do. We watched a bunch of stuff that we never watched before or never had the time to watch. And so I think I installed Netflix during the pandemic. And you have to pay for some of these things. So besides our credit cards, some of us make use of the PayPal network. And all of these firms I'm listing here all played key roles. NVIDIA is there because they supplied the graphic chips that drove much of the hardware that people were using and buying during that time. Of course, as you know, we kept in touch, but that's the time when Facebook converted to Meta. And good old Microsoft for its cloud storage was there behind the scenes working. So many of these firms, and you realize the common thread through them, they all conduct their business in the electronic sphere or online. And that's where, besides the guys who sold vaccines, of course, not to get into the obvious things. This is where they were, and they also during this time, they leveraged their brand value. I have to say their brand value jumped in billions of dollars in value during this time, which is why we often emphasize it's a good idea to pay attention to your trademarks. And there's some businesses that the chambers estimate will still remain in demand post-pandemic, meaning they won't go away that easy. Things like what we've gotten accustomed to. All the stuff we bought at home fitness, e-commerce, of course, and being able to purchase food online and have it delivered. Gaming, of course, telemedicine, because everybody wants to know, am I sick or not, and to self-medicate as far as possible in some cases. And of course, virtual events. So that's to tell you how the environment has shifted now. This has become plausible and a way to do business now going forward. Some of us may yearn to meet back together again, but the whole virtual sphere is here to stay. Okay. I'm getting into, just want to rush into the area I normally deal with. That is, it's been, these changes have been forcing some developments in terms of what we invent and who can invent or who can create. So I'm just stretching the envelope here in this whole issue of creations of the mind, and I put a question mark behind human intellect because we are seeing the rise of artificial intelligence. And those of us who know the Terminator franchise might say, oh no, it started. It's Cyberdyne Systems all over again. Now this, to be fair, this patent application was filed before the pandemic hit in earnest. So Dr. Stephen Thaler, he filed a parallel patent applications, and he listed an AI machine that he has the acronym DBUS, Device for Autonomous Bootstrapping of Unified Sentience, as the inventor. So he's the applicant, Dr. Thaler is the inventor, but he listed DBUS as the inventor, which is normally a person. And this made the news because some patent offices, or I should say a couple patent offices, granted the patent, and they acknowledged that AI could be listed as the inventor. However, the application was denied in the US, UK, and the EU, and so it was under appeal, simply because they said that the inventor has to be a natural person. And in many cases, we would require the inventor to explain how did Dr. Thaler get the right to file the application. Normally there's a statement from the inventor justifying the applicant's right to file. And I don't think Davis knows how to do that yet. And so that's where that application would have fallen down in some jurisdictions, depending on how the law is drafted. And I'm going to get into also another aspect of who can create. Besides AI, there are some people who distribute art created by animals. Now, this is going off the pandemic thing here, but this is stretching some definitions of who can own, who can create, because that is going to be very important going forward. If you have to consider anything that happens before or after the pandemic, when it comes to creations of knowledge-based things, ultimately somebody's going to ask the question, who created it? Because that who is very often going to be linked to the who can own, who can control, who can profit ultimately from these things. And so it's important to get the who correct early o'clock in the game. And this is where many projects fall down or flounder regarding intellectual property ownership later in time. So we've seen many technology-driven things, and these things have driven also a proliferation of stretching some things that will stretch boundaries, and I imagine they will continue to stretch boundaries going forward. So I just wanted to throw it out there in the mix to provoke some conversation. That's us at the IPO Trinbago. We can share these things if you wish after the discussion, but I just wanted to open up with that, open the batting with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cheng. I just have one question before we move on to Mr. Williams. So in a post-pandemic, more IP-intensive world, how can businesses monitor IP rights more efficiently?
Right. This is actually going to become important, especially if they seek to use the online environment for advertising, or if your business is actually conducted online. So you have to be aware of your branding, what messaging is conveyed in your branding. What does it stand for? So by now, many of us have had experiences now with different online platforms for video conferencing, and we have opinions and preferences. And those opinions and preferences are very much shaped sometimes by the branding messages that the owners embed in the brands themselves and the advertising. So that's why we're saying that it's important to get it right. The communication of your brand values, because when your material goes out online, you sometimes don't always have a lot of control over it, and it's up to customer experience. So it's important to get it right early o'clock, and to spend some time shaping that and responding to the any issues that might arise in that, and be aware of your competition, because quite frankly, if some of the platforms didn't pay attention to the rise of Zoom, they just get crushed, for example. So you have to respond. If Zoom adds some features, you got to respond and add some features too, and that is just the nature of competition. Okay. There's a lot I can say about this, but I'm going to try and keep it short.
Yes, because we have other presenters. So thank you so much. And we would have some more questions for you at the end of the session. So Mr. Williams, you are free to present. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, guys. I just need the host to turn on my video once more.
Sure.
Great. It's good to be here. Let me just get this PowerPoint up. Back to Zoom. All right, guys, can you see my screen fine?
Yes, I can.
Yep,
you can.
As said, I'm Erwin Williams from Teleo Systems, and I open this brief presentation to share some perspectives on changes that we would have seen coming to the technology industry as a result of the pandemic. Maybe they started before, or actually in the middle of, and how we can also leverage those changes to grow our firms, grow our communities, and just benefit the world, really. So let's get off with it. And to start off, if you can see this flag, it's waving a little bit. And that's all I'll say about the flag, but I'll come back to it. I actually want to dive right in with a question. And I saw Richard just touching it, and we didn't really coordinate his response and my response, but I love how it went. So the question is, how has the pandemic accelerated the demand for technology in fields and industries, right? So what I wanted to do was flip it to talk about firms that actually didn't survive the pandemic. I used, you'll see these are firms that were resident in the States, but don't worry too much about that. I'll come home. But if you look at these firms, some names you may recognize. Hertz, for example, may be well known for having been a car rental agency. The second one obviously relates to movies and movie-going, cinemas. Quite a few clothing companies or companies related to costuming, either if they didn't collapse, it went into bankruptcy. You can see as well in the bottom, an energy company, a travel firm, and a gym, a popular gym, Gold's Gym. So we have a list of companies that at least went bankrupt during COVID. And putting that in a local context, we had a news report from The Guardian that points out that 6,000 businesses permanently closed as a result of COVID. So it's like, how did businesses handle COVID? Quite a few didn't. So what did that mean for industry? Well, here's a list of those industries and the industries represented by those failing firms. Those food and travel and entertainment. We saw some, and I'm sure if you think about it, there are firms that you might know of that didn't make it. They just closed doors. And I mean, in your community, you may have heard of friends or relatives, or you yourself may have been a business owner that couldn't handle the impact of COVID. And so it brought me back to the question, how has industries changed? So I want to focus on a few of those categories to start with these two examples. Now, if you're like me, you did still like a bit of the outside food. That's what my family calls it. Hi to my family as well. I know they're watching. Hi, guys. So though we were cooking a lot, we still wanted to order here and there. And in fact, I heard a really good poem by one of our local national poetry laureates, I think is what they're called. And his, I think, won the first Citizens poetry competition, national poetry competition, related to supplying food. So how have these industries changed? Because you had to evolve, otherwise you would have ended up on the bankruptcy list. Well, people invested much more in food delivery and the logistics around that, powered by technology. You may have had, you or your parents may have ordered from groceries or from large chains, as opposed to going there yourselves. And what started during COVID, we hope may have continued after or with the changing of the pandemic restrictions. Just jumping across to the social side, and I promise, I know a lot of times when you talk about technology and social, you're going to hear talk of TikTok. I'm going to keep the TikTok talk low, but I really like what I saw happening on TikTok around people talking about food. The social part of food became global. I recently started watching, trying, and laughing at this particular account on TikTok. I think they do this hilarious. Things that I may not have bothered to take on prior to the pandemic now has become a big thing. Many of our families learned brand new recipes and new ways of thinking about food during the pandemic. And I want to note that because people have built social media profiles, they built companies on meal delivery and built companies on meal preparation, just coming out of the COVID. What about travel? So last year was a VR competition, an XR competition, AR VR driven by Kariri. And of the top 5 finalists, 3 of the solutions involved things related to travel. So the travel companies that survived, I believe, have started to take advantage of using augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality to deliver experiences, prepare their guests for experiences, and remind folk of what you could do when the place is free again. Many of those kinds of changes have taken place. The example above, there's a virtual assistant that was done by a hotel in London. And so the use of AI to support industry, to support even travel firms and other kinds of firms in that space definitely would have gone through a particular kind of ramping up. A really important thing to consider around these transformations. What about entertainment? Well, many things we thought would never happen happened. World premieres. You could have watched movies released on the first day in the comfort of your home in Trinidad and Tobago. How have they changed? Things we thought that couldn't have shifted, dramatically so. Fashion shows went virtual. Again, with the VR and the AR, if you have the appropriate headsets. But not just that, pushing out to audiences that may have never seen or heard of those things before. In-game events that were already happening became much more global. And maybe if you have friends like I did, quite a few of my friends got married virtually. They got married. Well, they were there present, and there were 10 or so guests, but hundreds of people online. How have these industries changed? They started to leverage technology to, and you might be saying, a wedding as an industry. Well, if you're only getting married, if you don't know yet, you'll soon learn that there's an industry around weddings, and part of it involved the delivery of media, delivery of content, and helping people participate even though they're very far away. So these are just some examples of transformation, and I wanted to stop on one more. We couldn't say no more school because you can't go to school. So education itself changed a lot. I mean, as we go back to school in Trinidad in about a month, and many other places have, you would hope that it's not just a regressive step, that people are not going to take advantage of some of the many good lessons that were experienced during this particular global event. So education did go through a particular kind of a change. Teachers delivered material online, homework. We never got a homework lesson physically from our teacher, from our child's teacher. Everything was sent virtually, so we could keep track and pay attention. There have been some teething issues, so there's a question of, are we better off or not? And I must mention that many people who didn't have access, who, for reasons that may be difficult to go into now, simply couldn't leverage the technologies in the ways others could have, were being left behind. So that it's not enough to simply say, oh, technology has made us all better. There are some who've been left behind in the transformation. And a caring society needs to check that out. One more thing I'll say is that educators themselves have been changing. I have friends who deliver lessons, who would have been delivering lessons physically, and now it's available virtually, and that actually means markets have opened up for them. They're delivering lessons to people around the region, which is not something they may have planned to do so quickly or even anticipating at all, but transformations took place by those who could leverage the technology. We're going to pause there for a bit. That was a lot to take in. Back to our flag. You might think this guy just likes a waving flag, and I do, but there is more to come in that flag. Another question here that kind of, I wanted to actually leave it out, to be honest. It felt like a big, hard question. But if you avoid the hard questions, you won't really get to real improvement and real transformation. So one of these questions relates to how our infrastructures, our local infrastructures, can handle the movement of data and digitalization. And I mean, to me, the question really boils down to this. Are we ready? And listening to the messages we've seen, those messages seem to talk about return to the office, to be kind, or return to work is how some of it would have been hearing it. Return to school and let's go back to normal. And I think if these are the main responses we've been hearing to this question, then the answer is obvious. Our infrastructures are not ready. But we glimpse the future, a future where people are first, because you don't really care too much about where people are at, just that they matter, that they're prioritized. More than that, if you aren't able to deliver a good service, your service will not survive. And so service providers would have been leveraging technology to do that. We saw that, again, those who survived became much more productive. As I mentioned with the lessons teachers, I said it in jest a bit, but to be honest, lessons teachers had to become competitive on a different level. It's like a really small way to look at this idea of global competitiveness. You're delivering this educational service, and all of a sudden, you're not just competing with the people around your physical vicinity, but if you deliver physics lessons, for example, you are delivering physics education around the region, but so are your compatriots in other places in the region. And of course, paying attention to the environment became a big, big deal.
You just have 1 more minute, Mr. Williams.
Sure, thank you very much. So I will stop there, except to jump to why this flag is up. I work at Telio Systems, and we do software. And I want to jump to the very end to point out why that flag was there. That flag runs in a 3D environment. You could check it out yourself later on. It took me 1 line of code to make that flag do that virtual thing. That's such a gigantic change from what it took many years ago to get this done. And that's an icon for what happened within our entire software industry. The kinds of changes we saw, many more entrants could participate. Low code and low code application platforms like what we build are now a real thing. But beyond that, the industry around software engineering is changing, and I'd say for the better. Remote work, remote products, work from where you're at, opportunities to grow and develop, all of that has taken place. And I think they've all ramped up significantly coming out of COVID. So I will stop there. Thank you very much for the opportunity, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. So just one question before we move on to Professor Hussain. So the pandemic has brought on monumental changes in consumer behavior, as we can see. Digital business is now a requirement, not a choice. Do you think that our local businesses made a seamless transition, and what are your recommendations moving forward?
I could think of a few businesses whose transition was seamless. And I think part of why that is the case is because they weren't responding to the pandemic. I think the businesses that were already on a journey, they were on a strong, deep, deliberate technological journey. They just continued, and they may have ramped up their efforts. For firms that either weren't on such a journey or tried to scramble during the pandemic to adopt particular technologies, I think it was not seamless, would have been very, very fraught and frustrating. And we, the public, would have seen that.
Thank you so much. So now we move on to our last presenter, Professor Hussain. You have the floor.
All right, thanks, Josanne. Let me share my screen. Okay, so my name is Patrick Hussain. I'm at UE. So, Erwin provided a nice segue into what I'll be talking about. So I'm going to focus more on the educational and research aspects of the post-pandemic experience or post-pandemic world. So first, let's talk about education. And again, I'm focusing on the tertiary level. By the way, my slides are changing, right? Just to check.
Yes, I'm seeing them changing.
Okay, all right. So what we found is that, certain classes can be efficiently done online. And so hopefully some of these will continue online. Specifically the postgraduate courses, the ones that require no physical laboratories, etc. Now, what this does is it allows us to expand our student base, because if it's online, we can now include students from the region or even internationally, and so the hope is that at least some of these courses can be continued online. In fact, some of our MSc in data science students are abroad and taking the program remotely. So we will have to continue some of them at least. So that's one positive benefit, because before the pandemic there was some resistance to doing things online. One thing we need to figure out is how we examine students, and we still need to have in-person final exams to ensure that the material that was covered, that the students have knowledge of the material. And online examinations are a little bit tricky. We've tried different things, so in-person final exams would be needed. Group projects as well have been successfully done online as well, because students now communicate online, and so they could do this collaboration for projects as well. In terms of research, so I supervise, several postgrad students, as well as other types of students, even students from other universities. I do some supervision, and so this could be done remotely. There's no need for in-person supervision as well. Again, this only holds for certain disciplines like data science, which is what I'm involved in. So the hope is that to be able to continue this type of research supervision. And again, this will allow us to attract international students, because no physical presence would be required. We could supervise PhD theses, for instance. The other positive with respect to the pandemic is many of the research conferences that we attend were done online, because people couldn't travel, which allowed us to participate in a lot more conferences than we normally would, because we just had to pay the registration fee as opposed to paying travel expenses and hotel expenses, etc. So this allowed us to submit papers to a lot more conferences than we did in the past. In terms of work, again, it depends on the type of work, but in the US, for instance, many big tech companies have allowed their employees to work remotely, and they are continuing to allow them to work remotely because of the nature of their job. This has allowed some people to even continue working in other countries. For instance, Barbados makes it a lot easier now for people to work within Barbados for a foreign company. And again, this is something we should take advantage of. Trinidad should be taking advantage of the fact that we have this lovely climate and beaches, etc., and make it easier for people to work remotely. In terms of the infrastructure, we basically consumed mostly during the pandemic. Richard talked about Netflix, etc. So it was mostly consumption. Even courses was mostly consumption. We need to start producing content as well. Not only creative content, but things like courses, etc. So when you start creating content, then the upload rate, the rate at which you can upload content, is important. Right now, downloading typically is faster than uploading because of the way the infrastructure is developed. Just a few words on AI. So AI is becoming, more commonplace, and several reasons for that. Two big reasons is that the increase in computing power, as well as the easy availability of big data. So you have things like self-driving cars, facial recognition, fraud detection, etc. Now we focus more on a subset called data science, which is where you use data to make better decisions. All right, so use the data to make better decisions. AI is commonly, the media uses it for data science, but it really encompasses more than just data science. Now, the interesting thing is the demand for such skills locally have also been increasing, especially during the pandemic. So insurance companies now realize they could use data science to improve their risk assessment. Finance companies are seeing it useful for things like fraud detection, etc. So the good thing about data science is it applies to multiple industries, and you can get jobs locally. So our lab, lab.tt, focuses a lot on these types of problems, as well as using the projects we work on with industry to publish as well. Of course, to do this type of work, you need a solid background in mathematics and programming. Other emerging technologies like 5G, Internet of Things, etc., has also changed the way we operate, not only we as individuals, but companies. So these technologies are changing at a fast rate. The cellular standards are being developed at a much more rapid rate than they have been in the past. So you went from 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, and there's also already development on 6G. So 5G will allow faster speeds, lower delays, and allow for more interesting use cases for things like VR and smart cities, etc. Then there's the Internet of Things, where you have all these billions of sensors being used to collect data in real time and make decisions in real time and controls as well. So things like smart cities. So this combination of AI, 5G, IoT, and the digitalization that is coming about, together with the pandemic, has created the potential for lots of innovative applications. All right, so how can you participate in all of this? Well, of course, you need a well-rounded education, and of course, you need these disciplines of mathematics and science, etc. Self-education is a big thing. Thousands of courses out there. Make use of them. Always be, when you see everyday problems, try to see how you can apply these technologies to those problems and go about and do it yourself. I mean, that's how we saw, we come up with some of the problems we work with or we've published. And be prepared for a lifetime of continuous learning, because these technologies are changing at a rapid pace and you have to keep up with them. So that is my introductory remarks for this session.
Thank you so much, Professor Hossain. So persons have been asking questions in the chat, and since one is directed to you and you just completed, I will ask you. Sure. So Mr. Williams mentioned that because everyone is online, that there is a lot of competition online and regionally. How can you attract other international students to our courses, I presume, to school?
Well, so it depends on the discipline, of course. So like machine learning, for instance, or data science, we kind of compete with some of the other universities in developed countries. But in certain niche areas like, say, climate change, that's where we could focus on programs that would combine, our unique environment with some of these advanced technologies. So yeah, to attract students, we would have to take advantage of our specific environment.
Thank you very much. So we can ask all the panelists to come on video since we have some questions for each of you. Thank you so much. So I believe this question wasn't directed to anyone, so feel free to chime in, have a discussion. What improvements can be made to our infrastructure that can help us move forward rather than go back to normal?
Don't start with the easy ones there, Josanne. I think an awareness of the destination is important. Knowing that, so for example, we have had announcements since back in 2014-15 of Vision 2030. And as far as I know, it's the only document that tries to describe a national vision. of that level and that to that detail. So for example, if we're saying, like I mentioned in my presentation, people did feel, in spite of the crush of the pandemic, that there was perhaps more care expressed to them, more concern perhaps about their health. I mean, it's a strange thing, because going to the produce market in Port of Spain, you have to wash your hands to go in. It creates such an interesting sense of, here's what I need to do to take care of myself. And it's a very small step. So I think the idea of broad, massive public goal attached to small, definable steps can allow us to move forward. What's the next step for us? So for example, people going back to the office. If you were able to work successfully from home, have you made the case to your employer with enough noise to demonstrate that maybe you don't need to be there every day of the week? It's something that I have been trying to tell my friends need to do. I work at a fairly enlightened firm so that we don't need to go back to the office to deliver work. We may have conversations about hybrid work because being in person has its benefits. But the idea of, all right, there's no more pandemic, go flood the roads with traffic, go spend 2 hours in traffic to simply do what you've been doing well for the last year and a half, 2 years. I think that's the kind of backward step we should be avoiding.
So yeah, so let me just add to that. So the question is about infrastructure and how do we avoid going back. It's not so much the technology, it's the mindset, the processes. So we've been used to these processes that did not take advantage of online technologies. And we now have to change those processes to be able to take advantage of it. You cannot use these newer technologies with old processes. And that's the conflict you have there, that companies will ask people to go back out to work because they still follow the old processes. So what is important is a change in process.
I can use my office as an example of there's some steps you need to start doing before the thing lands on your head, quite frankly. We were making plans to go to a virtual system, virtual payments, virtual filing, working from home since 2018, because we saw our counterparts, our colleagues in the Chilean office in API doing this thing, and we said we wanted this for our office, and we started the journey, and that journey took us to nearly a year of meetings with commercial bank, the treasury, just to make credit card payments possible. And we were one of the pilot projects for the public office to start accepting credit card payments. That was a seismic shift in revenue collection in the public service, which had steadfastly avoided credit cards for decades since I joined the office. And so, but that, as Patrick just said, it requires a mindset. So the mindset began with our former AG, who provoked the discussion and said we want to go online. And we said, we have the technology ready to offer services online, but our customers are going to expect to be able to pay online. We need to have the two ready together. And besides that, we were already in the process of digitizing. We had our database available to us. So now it was a simple matter of creating our VPNs and tunnels, and all of our technical staff could have worked from home. Like it felt like we were flipping a switch when we were given orders to work from home. I say that because we could have flipped a switch because we spent a year building the switch, all right, to get it ready. So when people ask us how you did it, I said it didn't happen overnight. You cannot just click and computerize everything overnight. We were validating data years before that. So we could have gone home and gotten into our files, which are all electronic, and our payments, and our clientele was on board with it. And they were so happy to be able to pay by credit card, not even have to. There's some applications I have there and we've never seen the customer. He's paid, he's gotten his rights, he's published online. We've never seen his face, we just know his name. That's what the way some people want it to be. And that's the way we are encouraging it to be. And we were encouraged, actually, if that's working for us, keep on doing it. And if I can add something, we actually made more money during the pandemic than the years previously. That's if you want to make a better case, and that's an unheard of thing in public service, making more money. What? We actually we did better. There was more productivity, etc.
On that note, Mr. Cheng, I have a question for you from the chat.
Sure.
Are there a lot of IPO-owned property in Trinidad and Tobago? And what kind of local businesses make use of this?
Okay, that's a two-part thing. There are a lot of intellectual property rights owned that are valid in Trinidad and Tobago, but they're mostly owned by foreigners. So 99% of all the patents are owned by foreign companies, foreign multinationals. Everything you see in Point Lisas and in the energy sector is foreign owned. The only energy company that has not filed any patents in this country is Petrotrin or Paria or local companies. They've never filed anything. It's all the foreigners, just to let you know. In the world of commerce and retail goods, it's 75% foreign, but 25% local. So the brands, and in fact, it's very closely tied to the brands that you see advertised. So any local brand you see that's in your face, I'm not going to call any names, but they tend to be in lockstep, managing their trademarks and making sure that top of mind is there in your face. So that's part of the branding strategy. So yes, I have to answer it like that. Mostly foreign, but the big growth area is with the local applicants who we are trying to encourage to get as IP savvy as their foreign counterparts.
Okay, nice. So this is for anyone or everyone. Are these types of technologies easy to be implemented in Trinidad and Tobago? I remember a while ago, Uber left Trinidad with the statement, there is no room for innovation in Trinidad and Tobago. What do you think about this?
Josanne, I could probably start off.
Sure.
Just on a side, Uber may not be the best example of a company asking for innovation or innovative environment. And just do some reading on it, you'll find out for yourself. There's actually movies coming out about that. But let me not pretend that there is not a good message there, which is, what is the innovative environment like? And as it turns out, one of the questions that you had fielded to us, Josanne, related to digitalization of processes. And to Richard's point, we engaged in one of those processes with one of our US customers to focus on a particular industry, the utility industry in the States. And we essentially took companies who were on a paper-based journey into a digitalized place where they now utilize iPad apps that we've built here in Trinidad. So we've built apps based on older processes, but we didn't just copy and paste the processes into the platform that we've built. So Telios offers a platform called QuickWorks, which is for low-code applications. We transformed the processes so that they were appropriate to the new environment they were going to. Anyone who says there's not a space for innovation in Trinidad, I don't want to be carte blanche, but they probably need to look a little closer. It is difficult. It is definitely difficult, and I'm sure if Professor Hussain would speak to it, he'd back that up. But the difficulty doesn't mean that you can't do it. It may mean you need to work harder, work more wisely, discover points of leverage. But that's what we do on a daily basis at Telios. So I wouldn't want anyone to walk around thinking Uber was right, because they weren't. We do innovate here every day.
I can back that up, because I've seen innovation suffer. As you're right, you have to push a little harder, and that's not a Trinidadian thing. That is a human thing. We resist change, and I can point at many foreign examples where change was resisted for a good while until it was overcome, and then the change is now normal. So whole categories of technologies were created because somebody pushed, and somebody kept pushing. Just to let you know, Trinidadians are very innovative, but they don't always file or apply the innovation to the local market because it may have more value in a larger foreign market. That's our observation, tracking the statistics and where do Trinidadian inventors end up. Just looking at Dr. Hussein's CV, you realize that he went all over the place, not just Trinidad. So to let you know that we have very brilliant people who are very innovative, but they don't stay here all the time. Just to put that out there.
So let me follow up on that. Yeah, we have innovative people, but we don't provide them with the opportunities to really, to really push themselves. So right now, I have students who are in industry, and we do, as I said, we do mostly data science work, solving problems for them, so like in insurance, etc. And some of it is really innovative. Now, to take it to the next step requires a lot. Of course, you have to have the company involved, and if they are not interested in filing a patent, for instance, then nothing could be done. Then there are other cases where, so for instance, we did file a patent about 2 years ago in the wireless space, but we filed it in Korea because it's something that couldn't be applied to Trinidad. Trinidad wasn't ready for that type of innovation. So there's a combination of things, but the net result is we do have innovative students coming out of university, and we can innovate at the same level as some of our competitors.
Okay, thank you so much. We just have about 2 more minutes. So if you have no more further comments, I'd like to close here. That's okay with everyone.
Can I make a comment on that point on the environment around taking innovation to the next level?
Sure.
It simply is that coming out of the pandemic in particular, I've seen 2 responses. Trinidad and Tobago has become very attractive to foreign firms who, because work from home is more of a thing, work from anywhere is more of a thing, many of our technically minded professionals are staying here and working for foreign firms. And like one of my coworkers was cautioning, you have to be careful because it is very attractive at the start, and you have to be deliberate about your own journey and your own career journey. So if there is remote work for the individual, there's also remote work or remote business for firms. So that, yes, getting out of the escape velocity required to leave our local market is significant, but there are ways to do it. And if you target those other markets, you set up yourself, you look for your connections in a positive way, I believe we have a lot of potential here in Trinidad to access those markets, but not just as remote employees, but as firms who living in Trinidad, but delivering services around the planet. It's part of why Teleos' tagline, software around the world, continues to be relevant to us, because we believe that we could do it from right here. And we've been making steps to do just that.
That is excellent. So ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the close of today's session. I wish to sincerely thank our presenters for sharing their time and expertise with us today. I also would like to thank our audience for attending this very enlightening SciTalk presentation and for all your questions. We do now encourage you to continue to explore SciTechKnoFest 2.0 and visit our networking lounge so you can continue this conversation with our very enlightening presenters. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks again.